People say there is a first time for everything. A first kiss, your first car, the unrequited first love. However, what does this mean in the grand scope of things? Are firsts more monumental because they are the first, or do we get better with practice? Do we remember our firsts as more important than they actually were, holding on to that magical moment as a mark of our past and future selves? Do our firsts outshine what comes next? On A First Time for Everything, we will explore with our guests their firsts and how those impacted the seconds, thirds, and even countless times after. Is the first the best or merely the beginning? Or worse, was the first the last because it was so bad? We will dig into the recesses of our memories and consider whether or not a first was the start of something amazing or something we'd rather not remember. Come along with me, Juliet Rose, as I put our guests in the hot seat to analyze their first and how they defined who they became. I promise you're in for a fun, although maybe bumpy ride. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of First Time for Everything. I am your host, Juliet Rose. This is our season finale. So this was our second season, and this is the final show of our second season. And I have signed on for season 3, starting in the fall. So that's pretty exciting. I also wanted to just give a shout out to Joe Compton and all he's done for Go Indie Now and for, indie creatives. I don't think anybody realizes how much he's actually taken on to really give us a voice out there. And so I just wanted to give some really good appreciation to Joe for doing that. Thank you for everybody who's tuned in. We just want to remind everybody to send a star and let us know how much you appreciate what we're doing. Here at Go Indie Now, every time you contribute, you'll get entered into our season prize package drawing with gift cards, swag, and more. Hi, Anita. Anita, I want to give a shout out to Anita. She comes into all of these and is so supportive of every author all the time. So thank you so much again, Anita, for tuning in. Tonight, we are talking with Ryan Null. I actually haven't read Ryan's books, but I'm pretty intrigued by that. So Ryan, why don't you give our listeners a little bit about yourself, where they can find you and what you write?
Hello, everyone. My name is Ryan Null. I'm from Southern Indiana. I've got 3 boys and been married for 15 years in August. I write epic fantasy, royal spicy romancy that will be out next year, and then dark fantasy for Australia. I've got several publishers, mainly 2. My new website is authorryannull.com. It will go live on the pre-launch date of special editions of book 1 and 2 of the Flare Chronicles on August 15th. The trailer will go live then, and then also the cover reveals. And then October 1st is launch. I am on all social media. I've got a growing newsletter. It's free, and I'm pretty much everywhere that I can be. So I appreciate being on the show, and thank you for you guys' time.
Yeah, definitely. And I appreciate you rescheduling. So I don't know if everybody knows, but a couple of weeks ago, we were supposed to meet, and then my power went out because we had a storm fall through and we were out for the whole night. So I really appreciate you being willing to reschedule, because I was looking forward to this chat. So welcome to the show. Yay. We'll jump right in. So one of the questions I start with, just because I feel like it's the best starting place, is when did you know you wanted to be a writer? And then how did you kind of follow that through with that?
So this first book is dedicated to my 8th grade teacher. I've dedicated to other people too, but I really kind of founded the book and series on her. When I was in 8th grade, I wrote 1 prequel for the Flare Chronicles, and then she loved it so much that she encouraged me to write another prequel. So I wrote another prequel, and then this book I wrote in high school 15 years ago. So my wife was kind of my first editor. She never reads, and she's not a reader, but she found it stashed away when we moved together, after high school, and she really loved it. So since then, I, been working on that. I ended up having kids, and I went to school for IT and business management, networking, and then life kind of happened. Last year, I published this book as book 1 and out of 3 in the series, and just kind of took a leap of faith, I guess. I went just running, they say everyone calls you to do something. So I felt like it was my calling, and I just went on the ground running, and good or bad, I guess I was to do something. So that was what I did, and I love helping people and supporting community, and I love writing and the storytelling. So
That's cool. One of the things I've loved about this show is how many people reiterate that common thread of how important teacher and spouses or teacher and partners are to helping a writer really find their voice and move forward with it. That encouragement. I mean, I did too. I had, school teachers that said, wow, you're really good. And that always stuck with me. And I don't think people realize how important it is to have those kind of internal support systems. As a writer, I think we often have doubt, like we know we like what we wrote, but we don't know if they're going to like what we wrote. So yeah, it definitely helps. And that has been a common theme across almost every writer that I've ever spoken to. So that's really cool. So yay teachers and yay spouses and partners. We really appreciate you. So talk a little bit about the first book you wrote and kind of your process for that. Like you said, did you self-publish that?
this one I did, and from there I just continued writing, and then I basically contacted every school, bookstore, or library, and just scheduled book signings out the wazoo. It seemed like I had a lot last year, so amen to spouses and partners because I was gone a lot from my wife and my kids, trying to sell books and meet people and that. Um, but then I just kept working at it, and I ended up writing book 2 and 3 within about 6 months or less. And then beginning of this year, I was signed on by a traditional publisher. So
Nice.
from there, it's really grown. I've wrote a couple of short stories. My publisher's got a fantasy magazine that next year is going to come out that I'm involved in. I'll be going to London this year for international
Nice.
tour, going to India next year. I've got about 30 bookstores across the U.S. and Canada that I've got to drive to and deliver books to and things like that. So I really
Yeah.
just kind of hit the ground running, and I knew what I wanted to do. And the community has been really supportive. People's been really nice, and they really love it. So it's kind of grown into more than I could ever imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit about like that kind of tour that you're doing, because I think that's something really important for other writers, especially newer writers, to understand is like kind of like the burden of marketing, the burden of getting your book out there. Did you set these up, like these different bookstores, and did you kind of plan this out, or how did this come about for you?
So I spend about 80 hours a week or more on my book. And you're right. I mean, there's a lot of sacrifice. So, I give up sleep or eating or family time. There's always time involved that you're giving up. I mean, being an author, and until you're like a New York Times bestseller or really majorly known, it's just consistently working at it. I've had some really good people and nice people that's kind of gave me connections to other people in different countries and things like that I took a gamble and chance on. But consistently, I did them. And now I talk to bookstores really across the U.S. pretty frequently. And I mean, that was really all me. So the traditional publisher is really nice. Arkham's a great guy. He's got a lot of things going he wants to do, but you still got to market at some point, no matter, if you're a bestseller or indie or where you are in your journey. So normally about once a week, I will contact bookstores and things like that and just see if they'll give me a chance. It's a great story, and if you see it and read it, you'd love it. Just give me some time and an opportunity. I mean, I can understand if people tell me no, that's okay, but at least just give me a chance.
Yeah. Yeah.
So generally, that's what I do pretty frequently. So
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, because like talking to writers, and especially ones that are newer to it, a lot of them, before they kind of get into it, have this kind of preconceived notion that all they have to do is write it and then the rest will be taken care of. And we all know, anybody who's done this, that is not the case. I spend probably more time in marketing than I do in writing because that's such a big part of trying to get it out there. Would you have any advice for somebody like that came to you and said, hey, I'm new. What do you think I should focus on after I'm done writing the book?
I mean, it's all really important. What really kind of helped me was that I found other writers that had that experience or knowledge, that kind of had been in that field, or I found people that had the experience in like making reels or marketing or doing newsletters. And, I really look to community feedback, engagement, or even other authors. I'd say, hey, what do you think about this? Or do you want to join? Anything you can do to help me, and then I'll help you in return. And I try to really give back. So for new authors and things like that, I definitely try to recommend, someone like me or someone that's getting established, because they have a lot of connections, and authors are pretty tight community. Same with readers. I mean, we all kind of go hand in hand. So if you really tell them what you want to do and things like that, most of them will give you something or help you with something along your way, and then you can just give it back and pay it forward.
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's an important thing too, is we are a really tight community. And that's, finding kind of that niche in a writing community can make a big difference. It's a very isolating job to be a writer. Many of us have day jobs, but like when we are sitting down to write, it is, it's you, right? And so it can get really isolating. There could be self-doubt with that as well. So I think finding and building that community is really good. And that's one of the things I loved about Going Now. When I was kind of brought into the fold, I was like, oh, hey, there's like a whole community out there of people like me who want to support and lift and help each other out. So that was really huge. I was kind of intrigued by something you said in the beginning. You said something about being published in Australia or with an Australian publisher. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. So again, it's just connections is really what kind of spawned that. There is an author that I was on her podcast, and then she introduced me to her publishing company that she's trying to start. And so she's going to release 26 novels as a goal as part of a series. And there'll be 2 more series in that. And I pitched it and I got accepted. So I finished the novel, and it'll be published in Australia. And then my traditional publisher is in Canada. So I'll be a 2-time international author. But that was a whole new experience, because I never really written like vampires and werewolves or dark fantasy. But I've always been one to, really accept the challenge and really go out of my comfort zone and try new things. And so that's what I did. I ended up really loving the story, and it flowed well. And I hope people enjoy it too, because this is my first kind of stab at that dark fantasy realm, I guess you'd say.
Yeah, for sure. So you write, kind of everything you write is some level of fantasy, correct?
Correct. Yeah. I mean, I thought about writing like thrillers or mystery, but I really try to listen to my readers. So what I do is I'll put a poll on Facebook and all my social media, and then I will tell people, hey, name a dragon or name a tower or a town or a person. And then that vote, whatever gets the most votes, I pick a random reader or influencer, and then they get their name in the dedication of the books. So that way their actually name is published, thousands of copies or different countries or things like that. And so my spicy romancy, which it'll be about 5 or 6 books, and I got it done in about 4 months. It's about 600 pages. It's pretty thick, but that was why that came about, because normally I had only write epic fantasy, but one of my readers that won the poll said, "Hey, you should write this," and I was like, "All right, well, it's new. I've never wrote anything like that, but I'll take a stab at it." So
That's awesome. That's awesome. And how is like your feedback been? So since you've put out these books, are you getting good feedback? Are you really developing a good readership through? And if you are, like, what do you feel like some of those keys for you were?
I am. So far, the cover that you see, that book has won 4 awards, including 1 Air National Impact Award, and then the Positive Impact Award in Positive Fiction. And then so far, the feedback that I've gotten from the introduction, I'll send readers if they want to snip it, my spicy romancy. They love it. They said it's really good. It's kind of the next big thing. So far, the vampire and werewolf dark fantasy, my publisher really likes it, and so far they like it over there in Australia. So I've gotten a lot of good feedback. And then recently, I'm going to have my journal. So the main character in this series, one of them at least, his name's Daniel, and he's mirrored after my youngest brother, Daniel. But I speak to a lot of kids and youth and give them inspiration and things like that. And one of the kids, her mom contacted me after finding out I was giving away books to the summer reading program. So I've gave away about 200 books across here to Florida, really a bunch of states and counties and that for their summer reading program. And that mom contacted me and was like, hey, my daughter loves your books and things like that. And I remember her from speaking and to that class, and she really kind of touched my heart and soul and just kind of words are said. So she will end up doing the prequels of the Flare Chronicles, and then she will do the cover for Daniel's journal as well. And she'll get paid for it. Plus, I mean, that's kind of a launching pad for her as going in a sixth grader, and it really provides and gives back to the community.
Yeah, that's really cool. I love that you do that with the summer reading program. I'm actually a librarian, so I get how important that is, because every day is summer reading program for us right now. So yeah, and anything we get to help helps. It really does. Libraries are very underfunded, so yeah, anytime someone's like, "Hey, let me give you something," we're like, "Yes, please." It's awesome. And Anita asked, "What Canadian publisher are you with?"
I'm with a Keetup Publishing House. It's in Canada, and he's a great. Arkham's the owner. He's a great guy. He's got some big plans, and we've talked about some big things that we want to do in that. And I'm just really humble for it because I know most authors got to have an agent or a publicist or things like that to get a traditional publisher. But I didn't have to have one. So me and Arkham had been friends on LinkedIn for about 3 months, and he saw basically everything I was doing, everywhere I was going, and really trying hard to get my book out there and what I wanted to do. And then he just wanted to take a chance on me. So he said he believed in my work, he loved my stories, and wanted to really see it shine. So
nice. Yeah, I love when it's kind of like kismet like that, where things just come together and you don't have to force it. Just out of curiosity, you mentioned donating books to the summer reading program. What age group would you say your books are for?
So I always tell people they're really for any age. I mean, I've got second graders to adults reading it because it's clean fantasy. So it really depends on your reading skill, but it's really considered YA fantasy. But I mean, it's really your reading skill. So I hate to say it's a certain age group just because, like I said, I've got second graders to adults reading it.
Yeah, so it's appropriate for any age is what you're saying.
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. That's good to know. I mean, as a librarian too, that's one thing we see is there's a lot of adults that read YAs, a lot of adults that even read juvenile fiction because they just enjoy that. And so, there is that aspect of understanding, who and what you're trying to market to based on the style of writing versus, usually it is like, is it clean? Are there these specific things? But having something that kind of smart, like it reaches more markets simply because you can have a second grader or a 92-year-old read it, without having to worry about what the content is. So that's really cool. So talk a little bit about the book tour you're doing. You said you're going to be going all across the country.
Correct. Yep. So I've got let's see. In October, I'll be going to London. There's a big gala where I'm going to pitch to movie producers and directors about having my book made into a movie and to television, things like that. And I've got some contacts in London that's going to show me around. When I get back, I'll have a weekend free. But then after that, I'll be going to New York for 3 days for a big steampunk event.
Nice.
And then I'll be at Iowa for a book signing. I've got a couple bookstores there that's going to carry the book. November, we got Georgia, Kentucky, Tennessee. I've got about 30 more stores or so that I've got to deliver with a couple book signings. I'll be in Ohio this weekend and next weekend. So I'm a part of the Columbus Book Book Festival. It's about 43,000 people. And I'll be in Ohio a couple times too in September, well, twice in September. And then I'm also part of the Author All Stars, which is ran by Tria Avant, and I may butcher the name, but she has a program called Author All Stars that I got accepted into. So I'll be in Atlanta, Georgia, beginning of December for the awards ceremony. I'll be on live TV, and then they do a bunch of photography and live interviews and things like that. So that's plus cool. The local radio, and then whatever. I'm part of the Friends of the Library too, and then I'm also the vice president for the Writers Guild in Evansville, Indiana. So whatever we've got going on both ends. So
yeah, so you're staying busy. So you said Georgia. Now you said Atlanta. Are you coming to Georgia any other time?
Yeah. Excuse me. Yes, I will. November 14th and 15th, I'll be in Georgia. I've got 2 bookshops there that's going to carry the book, but then along the way, either along the way or on the way home, I've got about 30 bookshops that I've got to deliver to. Next year, I'll be in Texas, Nebraska, India at some point, London again. This year, I was a guest reader at Books by the Bay in Pensacola, Florida, and they invited me back, so I'll be back there. A lot of people enjoy reading from this book. I'll probably read the second book next year, but then we've got Iowa, New York again, Missouri, I think, Wisconsin, a little bit of everywhere, a little bit of everywhere.
Yeah. It sounds like you fly or do you drive?
Most of the time I drive, just because, I mean, we've got our passports and cards, and I've got my visa to UK, so I can really go anywhere in UK. But my wife likes driving, so she likes the scenic route and the scenery and things like that. So plus, yeah, I mean I've got a 5-year-old and a 6-year-old.
So yeah, but yeah, I love driving cross country. Yeah.
Really, it's just wonderful. We've seen so many things, and I mean, I've traveled a lot since I've been a kid. My dad was big on vacations and going places and things like that. So for me, I enjoy it. My wife didn't travel until me and her got married and we dated and things like that. So she really enjoys it because there's so much out there that she really hasn't seen that I've seen. And then we've got a 5-year-old and 6-year-old that are 10 months apart. So they love coming along because anytime we're not home, they say it's vacation.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. It makes me think when I was back in the day, my kids were little and we got a rental car and they thought that was like going to Disney World. I don't know why, but like getting a rental car was like the most amazing thing. Because, we drove like a beater. So yeah, they were just like, wow. I'm like, yeah, that's sad.
Right. I know.
Very cool. So, hey, you mentioned I'm in Georgia. So what shops, you said bookstores in Georgia. Which bookstores are you going to have books at?
So the I want to say the Raven's Lore.
Raven's Lore. No. I just did an event there this past weekend.
Raven's Lore?
Yeah.
There you go. Yep. And then the Crazy Book Lady too.
Crazy Book Lady, Stacy. Yep. And the events there. Yeah. See, I know all that. I'm familiar with. So that's awesome. Very cool. Very cool. And whatever you got to check out if you're in Georgia, look into the Bookseller in Conyers, Georgia too. They're really awesome. And Bear Book Market actually here in Delano. They're really supportive too of indie authors or smaller authors. So yeah, that's really cool. Very cool. So moving forward, so you have your plan for your book tours and stuff like that. Moving forward, what are your goals with writing?
I mean, right now, I really been focusing on the magazine stuff my publisher is going to publish. We've been collecting authors and submissions and things like that for it and ideas. He's got some big plans in the future that I'll be kind of in charge of that. And then, and down the road, I do want to open a bookstore and a warehouse distribution, just because I'm going to be his distributor. There you go, for his books as well. And I've got about 10 places that said they would carry them. So he'll be sending books to me, and then I'll distribute them across the U.S.
Nice.
But I'm very big on community engagement and giving back and things like that. So my hope is the bookshop and warehouse will provide jobs and benefits to the community. That's just something different. And it'll hold like arts and crafts and all the local creators, because it's hard to find a store, I guess, a physical store that'll carry your stuff, unless you're doing like me and you're just calling everybody and their brother.
That's what I did. That's how I know all the bookstores enjoyed it, because I literally sat down one day and like, I'm just going to contact every single one. I went into like, not MapQuest, I'm so old, Google, and just typed in like bookstores, and I pulled up the map and just literally started contacting everybody. So that's what you have to do. I'm kind of curious about what made you land on fantasy versus other genres.
So I've always been a fan of fantasy. I read when I was in really middle school. I read about 300 books or more a day, not a day, but a year, like in a school year. And I loved. Thank you. I love fantasy just because it can take you to a world, that is not reality, and you can be whoever you want to be, and there's just so many possibilities. And I was introduced to Dragonlance books, which most people don't know. There's some people know, but that series really had a lasting impression. And then Redwall and Eragon and all those really traditional fantasy books. And so I've got about 80 Dragonlance books myself, because I just loved them so much that I just kept buying different ones. I've got a bunch of Redwall and Harry Potter and Eragon books too, as well. So that was just kind of what I love to read. And then my 8th grade teacher was like, "Hey, you should write something that's different and unique and challenging." And so I was like, "Well, I'm just going to write this story about knights and dragons, and hopefully it wins first place, or I get an A on this," because I was in 8th grade. And she loved it, and she kept pushing. And then I was like, well, maybe if I expanded the world and did a little different, which I do my own custom maps. So a lot of times my maps are like a newsletter exclusive. They take about 80 hours in a month. I'll do them. And so for this book, I redid the map a couple months after it was published, and I made the whole kind of world. I got to do another map before like the catalyst, but I just haven't had time. So that was really what dived me in fantasy.
Yeah. So when you do maps, you're doing like the world building where you kind of create a place and then you fill in all of that information.
Yes. So normally I go into it with the mind perspective that I want to write 300 books or more. And in my world of Azerin for this, which I sell the map too. It's a merchandise item, but I can write probably 300 to 400 books. I mean, it's got almost 20 countries. It's got oceans. It's got dunes and castles and towers and woods and kind of elves, a little bit of everything. On my Spicy Romancy series, which that map will be a newsletter exclusive for July, which I got to send them out. But that map, I thought, I'm going to do something different. I'm going to include like fairies and orgs and trolls, and just a little bit, dig a little bit deeper and make it more interactive. So I did. It turned out really good. And it's still the same way, though. I can write 300 books in that kind of realm. Just like Azerin, I can do the same thing.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. That I write, so when I write, I'm really like horror, or I write like contemporary suspense. So like, I don't really get into the fantasy elements. And I'm always intrigued about world building, because I feel like that's probably what holds me back the most, is just the ability to world build on the level that it requires. How much of what you do is like planned out? Like, do you build the world first and then kind of work through that? Or how do you really kind of go about creating a world that the reader's really immersed in?
So I do things a little bit backwards. I try not to, but typically most world builders or fantasy authors, they'll create the world, and really sketch it out, and then they'll write. I have a bad habit of writing the first book, and then I'll go back and I'll make the world from the first book and then just kind of expand it out. I don't know why I do that. It's just easier to get it out of my head, and then I can go look at, hey, I want this, or here's a cool idea for this and that. Um, but I love world building. I grew up playing D&D and all those like fantasy RPGs and things like that, as a kid. So it really, to me, it comes natural. I do try to put in like myths or legends or towers or something that I can use. Hey, I can use it for another story, or I can use it to add on or enrich, make the stories better. Um, it takes a tremendous amount of time though to build the maps, because you've got to, it's like a layered. It's just the same thing as like the world or the earth is layered. You don't just got the land, you've got the lakes and the roads and the cities and the towns and the rivers and all that thing that interconnects everything. So it ends up turning into about 80 to 100 hours to build a massive 24 by 36 map generally, just because of the legends and interconnecting, and then you want color code and things like that. So
That's amazing.
but I enjoy doing it. It's just time consuming.
Yeah, I actually work with a guy, and I had him teach. I teach classes at the library on writing, but the one I didn't teach was world building. And I had this guy I work with teach it, because he does that. He says he can just go home and he'll spend just the rest of the night making maps and world building. And I was like, I just don't get it. But like, so he was talking about that, like just the intricacies of everything that are required to create a world that is believable. And I never really had thought about it until he said that. And then he got into the maps as well. And I really found that fascinating. Do you feel like that's a big selling part for your books, is that you have been able to create these maps so that the reader can really like look and see where the characters are going?
I do. So now I sell about, I sell about 6 merchandise items. I'm gonna launch like 6 more at book launch, but the map is kind of my most expensive, just because Vistaprint's the only thing that can print something that big for a reasonable rate with shipping. But now I have it like laminated, and I'll have it on the table or on a stand where people can see. And almost 9 times out of 10, they will stop and just look at the map. Or you get little kids that, you get the youth and children that are like, oh, hey, look at that. And it's shiny and it's color coded and all this fun stuff. And then the parents are like, oh, well, what's this? Or you get some fancy lovers that stroll, and then they see the map and they just instantly stop. I'm like, hey, look at this map. This is what I created, and this is my world. And it kind of introduces them to it without, having to kind of flag people down, so to speak, and it builds that personal connection with readers, because you can, like, I'll point and I'll show them exactly where the books take place, 1, 2, and 3. Even though right now I'm only selling book 1, but I'll still show them, hey, book 2 takes place here, book 3 takes place here, and this is the evil island of the evil gods and the island of the good dragons, and just trying to start that conversation and start that engagement. And then generally it'll lead to people being like, whoa, this is cool. Like, is this your world? And at some point in time, either if they don't buy it, they'll buy, they won't buy. My newsletter's free. They'll sign up for the newsletter, or, they'll take a couple cards, or, and I've got a lot of bookshops now that carry the book locally. So I've even had people maybe not buy it for me that day, but they'll go to like the coffee shop that sells it, or the bookstore, and they'll buy it there. And then, they'll send me a picture of the book, or the owners will say, hey, someone bought your book.
Yeah. What you're doing, I think, is really important. It's good advice for anybody kind of trying to figure it out. I know a lot of people who kind of don't want to have to like go offline to try to sell. Like they're like, well, I just want to be able to sell my books online, whatever. And I spend almost every weekend at events. I mean, I get it. Like, you have to put yourself out there. You have to really, make yourself approachable. And I think I love that you did the maps. And it reminds me, I had a guy that I did Nerdiverse with, and he was next to me, and he had posters from his images from his stories. And the same thing, people would stop and just look at the poster, and that created a really natural conversation flow for him to be able to start talking about the book, because he could talk about where the image came from. And I love that idea with your maps too, because I would stop and look at a map. It's intriguing, right? Like we all intrigued by that. So that's brilliant. And do you sell the maps then too? Like, can somebody then buy the map while they're there?
They can, yep. I carry about 2 or 3 with me just because, in case they sell it. Like I said, it's the most expensive one that I do sell. It's $37, but I mean, Vistaprint charges me, a pretty amount plus shipping, and I don't make a lot off my merchandise because I don't want to be, I don't know. I've always been kind of the underdog, and I kind of rally the underdog, and that person that's just trying to benefit their family and support the community and at a reasonable price and rate, and has good intentions. So I don't price my merchandise really crazy high. I try to keep it fair. The map is unfortunately the most expensive because I can't get it locally. I've got to get it from Vistaprint. They're the only place that can print, such a big laminated size. But I do sell it, and I'm hoping, like I said, the merchandise picks up more. And I've done a lot of rebranding lately, like author cards and different things like that. But I feel as an author, you've got to do that. It's constantly learning and growing and trying to better your craft in all the aspects.
Yeah, and I think that's really smart. And I think that's, merchandise can really play into that too, because I think, what I do when I do events, I always have something other than just my books at the table, because one thing I realize is usually covers my table fee if I have other stuff, and same thing, I don't overprice it, but you got to think that way. You have to be like, okay, so what happens if somebody comes up and they don't read books? Do I have something for them? And so having those things really do help. People are very visual too, and I think that helps to have something that they can come up and really kind of look at and dig into. What are some of the challenges you feel in marketing specifically that you're facing or that you have faced in trying to get your books out there?
The biggest challenge I've really had, it's helping because I've seen the effects, but the biggest challenge that I've had is just getting your name out there, because the market is so condensed, and it's just so saturated with all the other books that you've really got to put a lot of money and time into rise above everything else, and it's like we go to events every weekend that just to gain a little bit of readers, and even if it's like 5 or 10 readers, it's still kind of builds that base. That as long as that base is growing, that's great. But that's the biggest challenge, is how do you make yourself unique and different, that you stand out in, the 1,000 books that's published every day. And every year there's 16,000 or something published. So you've got to really brand yourself that's different and make yourself unique, that people are like, oh, okay. Which I had a event, I think it was a couple months ago, but it was really humbling because the same place probably 5 or 6 months before that, people knew me because I'm well known in the community, but they didn't know my writing skill or my books or what I did or anything like that. But then I had an event at the same place about a month and a half ago, and it was just so humbling because as I'm talking to people, they're like, oh yeah, you're that guy, or hey, I know that name, or I know that book, or and most people would know it without me like telling them. They would just come up or pass by and be like, hey, good job. Like, so you see it working in that aspect. So it's humbling to know that your name's being circulated, and that all the hours of hard work and time you've done, it's kind of paying off,
Yeah. Yeah. And I think, I see that all the times with newer writers, they get very discouraged very quickly because they're like, well, I went to this event and nobody came up, or, I sold 3 books or whatever. Mm-hmm. And when I always try to explain this, I've been doing events now for a few years, is now, and this I'm like, I'm in year 3, now doing the same events. Now I'm starting to get that where people are like, oh, I got your book last time, let me get another book. Or I remember you, or I've read that before. And I'm like, hey, and I think it's really important to kind of remember that this is a process. It's very few people blow up overnight and are just known. It's really important to say what I'm doing and everything. If I sell a book, I still sold a book to somebody. That person's still taking my work home, reading it. And if it's good, then they're going to remember me the next time. Maybe they'll buy two, or maybe they'll tell their friends. So I think it's really like that, like getting out there and understanding that this is a process. It's a journey, not
Really
just
is.
like, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a journey, and I gave a speech about publishing and the whole kind of process and marketing and things like that to our Writers Guild not too long ago, and that was the biggest thing that I really tried to stress to our guild members, and I stressed to authors and things like that because it is a journey. It's a consistent journey that you got to really work hard at. You got to show up, and you got to keep doing, but I've been to events where I've lost money between,
Oh yeah.
like you said, the table fee, and then you've got your gas, and you've got your
Your
hotel
hotel and
and
the
food,
food
and
and
then if you
yeah.
bring, yeah, you bring the whole family along, and then you're like, whoa. But what I always tell people is it's never a loss because if you gain a connection, or you gain a friend, or you gain another author that or a newsletter sign up, or even just one person, and or if you hand out 20 business cards or author
Yes.
cards,
Yeah.
like that stuff spreads. So it's
Yes.
never a loss. And I think a lot of authors go to an event or a festival and they expect to sell a bunch of books, and then they do kind of well or not so well, and they leave disappointed because their expectations were really high about selling. But then when I start talking to them, I say, well, did you meet anybody, or did you get some
Right.
author cards or business cards? And, what about newsletters? And all those things are really valuable. And sometimes, I mean, they're worth more than the money you spent going because
Right.
it leads to something else. And, like you said, it's a journey. So every little milestone kind of builds upon itself.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. And I think it's really important when you do get discouraged to remember that there's never an event that you do. Well, there's rarely an event, I've been to a few, where you don't walk away with something, those connections, or, you have sold something or whatever it is. Occasionally I've definitely done events where it's like, poorly organized and you really don't walk away with anything, but you don't do those ones again, but like it's a constant building of the next step in your author journey. Um, if you were if you could look back, say, to the beginning, and now with what you've learned, having done these different things, what are like some of the kind of top tips that you feel like you wish you'd known to begin with? So that you didn't say, maybe I did bad events. Trust me, I did somewhere. I sat there and thought, what did I do? But what are some things that you could go back and say, these are things I wish I'd known from the beginning so that I could have maybe avoided that?
I would definitely say I wish I would have known more like research about just publishing in general because the whole process and the vanity presses and hybrid presses and all those different terminologies was really all new to me in the very beginning. And then, I've learned the marketing part, which I wish I would have really knew more about it because it would have helped before. And then the newsletter was a big thing that I try to, tell my authors or readers or family people I know because that newsletter, has been such a vital piece that people love it. Bookstores love it. I mean, just
Yeah.
influencers, everyone loves it. So, and I didn't start that till 3 or 4 months after publishing.
Okay.
I wish I would have had it from the get go because it ended up being a lot of work going back and, asking the same people that bought a book or try to, connect with people that I met at a festival or event. And it was like, hey, I have this brand new newsletter. Do you want to sign up? But
Sure.
a lot of people, thankfully were pretty humble and kind and that kind of thing. So they signed up. But it's definitely a necessity because not only gives you that direct connection with your readers or bookstores or influencer other authors, but it also builds excitement for book launches and events
Sure.
and travels, and people look forward to that. So it's that one-on-one connection that makes the engagement better,
I agree.
and then from there you just learn. So those for me were the biggest things. I've learned a tremendous amount, even like podcast. I mean, I've started to do a lot more, but I didn't know anything about that last year. So I wish I
Sure.
would have
Yeah.
known and done more. But
Yeah.
I've, it's just a learning
It,
part.
it is. I mean, there's so much. I mean, I think we learn. I was talking to another author, Bob McGowan. We were talking about like how you learn as much from failure as you do from successes, where you're like, you try something, it just doesn't work. You're like, okay, not doing that again, but you try something, it does work. And so eventually you start refining what you do and it becomes more successful. You know, I had events in the beginning where I'm actually introverted, which probably hard to believe, but I really am. Everything is like scripted, but I didn't know that at first. And I would sit there just in like a panic at first, like, oh my gosh, you know, like, and people would come up and I wouldn't engage with them. So when I started observing other people at events and saying, okay, I like how they're engaging, but I don't like how they're engaging. And so I started learning what did and didn't work, even based on when people were doing things I thought didn't work, you know, like I like the idea of what you're doing organically by putting something that will bring people to the table comfortably versus like yelling at somebody walking down the hall. So I think it
You're right.
is like, you know, right. It's like, it is a learning process, right? We do have to figure out what does and doesn't work. And sometimes we do it ourselves or through other people. So let's talk social media, like, because this is an area that I don't do well at. I hate social media. I really just don't like it. But it's necessary. It's a necessary evil. How do you feel about social media? Do you use it in your marketing? And if you do, how do you do that?
So I do. It is a necessary evil, unfortunately, because I probably spend 3 hours a day on social media. I'm on there a lot, and
Wow.
a lot of things that I have found is, yeah, it's it's a lot, but it's a necessary evil because I mean, I've met a lot of, even from LinkedIn, I've met a lot of readers and
Mhm.
bookstore owners or librarians and things like that, event, coordinators that if I wasn't on there constantly, then I would have never known.
Right.
Now, I'm not very good at reels or videos, so TikTok and my YouTube channel are kind of my forte. They're not something I'm good at, but everything else I'm pretty good at. And I've learned more too. Like I just got my name on Google Maps, so it's now officially a business on Google Maps, and
Really?
getting those reviews and,
That's
and
interesting.
different aspects. So
So how'd you do
it
that? Like, how did you
it's
get a
it's
Google Map listing?
so basically I never knew it was a thing, but then
I
I
didn't
started
either.
looking at other authors, and it was a thing. Yeah, I didn't know, and so part of the Author All-Star program, they're like, "Hey, you need to do this." I'm like, "Okay, well, I mean, this is new, but I'll take a stab at it." I ordered a banner off of Vistaprint, like a yard sign, and then I set up part of our garage as like an employee kind of area. I added the information, and then I took a video recording showing Google like all my different things, where I live, and they finally approved it a couple weeks ago. But since then, I've been saying, "Hey, here's my Google business review," because it shows up in Google Maps now. Here you go. Like, please leave a review. I've added my merchandise, things like that, and it's got Google Analytics on it where you can monitor traffic, and then you can even connect it to your own website and monitor the traffic flow from there too. But it's again, it's another learning kind of aspect, just
Yeah.
like social media. So um, I try not to be on it all the time, but there's so many communications and just things out there that are kind of grabbing people's attention or readers' attention, and so you almost have to be on it,
Yeah.
um, constantly, just to capture. And then what I found too is there's a lot of Facebook groups, or there's a lot
Mhm.
of like channels on Threads or Instagram that really make a difference, because if you get enough hype and buzz and people talking about it, then it kind of spreads everywhere, and then everybody's talking about it.
Yeah.
Um, and that's where the social media aspects play in. But it is very time consuming, I will say, and it is a
It
learning
is.
process as well.
Yeah, it is. And it's hard if you're somewhat humble to like initially kind of figure out how to market yourself without annoying everybody, So do you tend to do
Yeah,
that through more like personable kind of posts, like you're talking more about yourself, or how do you really handle that kind of side of marketing without draining yourself?
I so I do have someone that helps me with it. She does quite a bit, but I still post really everywhere on social media. And I mean, I spend a lot of time on it, and I'm always looking for bookstores or readers, or on LinkedIn, I'll find readers or add my newsletter, things like that. I've found that a lot of bookstores will answer more on social media
I
than they
do.
will
Yeah.
like email.
Email.
So
Yeah,
email
I
is still
totally
kind of
found
a
the same
thing,
thing.
but
Yeah. Yeah. And I think a lot of them have
it's
social
it's
media
it's
people that,
trending.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's trending more towards social media. So I have more connections at bookstores and stuff that I talk to on social media than I do their own email. So, and a lot of them, they get flooded with emails and marketing and things like that. So that social media connection's kind of that one-stop shop.
Yeah.
But I do again try to give back to the community in that. So I do share a lot of bookstores and coffee shops and businesses their posts, and try to help spread the word on events. And that's the other nice thing about social media is that, as far as like Facebook, especially, you can make an event and then you can invite their friends, and then they can invite their
Mhm.
friends, and it just kind of grows from there because it's all about that interconnecting engagement community. Um, but it's hard to not get lost in it, I guess you'd say, because you got to spend so much time on it and putting
Yeah.
yourself and your products out there that it can consume your every bit of your whole day.
Yeah, it really can. And it's a rabbit hole. I mean, like, because especially if you have so many different social media. So there's, all these different ones now. And like, I tend to try to find two that I focus on, like where I have my most following. That's the two I focus on. And I might go to the other ones less often and still post things, but I have two that I post on daily. And then I have, those. But I mean, if you tried to post on every social media out there, you would spend most of your day just doing social media. But I agree, it's necessary. I mean, there's Facebook groups. That's how I find out about events. So I create events, but I also find out about events in my area through social media. So it is really important as well. I'm just going to give a morning because my battery's starting to get low, but we're actually close. So we're going to start to wrap this up. I wanted you to go and kind of talk again about your different books that you have, kind of each genre or subgenre, um, if they're currently available, and again, when they're coming out, if they're not currently available, and then again, where people can find you.
Okay, yeah. So the Flare Chronicles, that world of Azerin, that realm, that current version, what you see there, will be available till August 15th. That is pre-launch, the trailer launch, and then my new website, www.authorryannull.com. That will have all my books, all my events, things like that, and contact. And my social media has all my social media, as well as a immersive like reading platform. So if you buy an ebook, you'll have to read it on the website, but it's really cool with the backgrounds and the characters and just different things, the map and things like that we've got coming. So it's really a immersive reading experience. I'm also on Facebook at Ryan. I think it's Ryan John Null Official or Ryan Null Official. I'm on Instagram, Ryan John Null, Ryan Null on LinkedIn. I've got a Pinterest group. I've got TikTok.
You got
If
it
you
all.
search the Flare Chronicles, yeah, I really do all of it. So, or Flare Chronicles, you'll see me on Google Business, Goodreads, things like that. Because I have a blog on Goodreads, and I have a YouTube channel under Ryan John Null as well. It's got my kids and family and things like that. But that's really everywhere now. My Spicy Romancy, that should be out next year at some point. I'm not sure exactly when. It'll be out with book 3 in the Flare Chronicles, and then Daniel's Journal as well. And then we've got something else that me and my publisher are gonna try to plan a special just give back to the readers. And then my dark fantasy, and that's the vampire and werewolf novel series for the Emergence series in Australia. I believe it's next year. I don't have an exact date, but I believe it's next year just because the last date for submissions as far as the manuscript turn in is in October. So that, next year would give plenty of time for editing and formatting and advertisement, marketing, and things like that. So I do have a couple of short stories. My publisher has a fantasy magazine that'll be every 3 months. That'll launch next year. We have some other things launching next year, so stay tuned. We have a lot going on and a lot of exciting stuff.
Yeah, you definitely stay busy. So if people wanted to find out if you were going to be in their area, do you have on your website, do you have like a list of like where you're going to be on your tour?
I will. It's not launched yet, but I will. But you can also check my Facebook. I think it's Ryan Null Official. You can go to Instagram at Ryan John Null. A lot of other things, but my newsletter too. That's another reason I try to tell people to sign up for my newsletter, just because it does have like major events that's coming. It has international tours. It has dates and things like that. But I am on Instagram and Facebook quite a bit. I'm also on LinkedIn as well. I put everything there. And then I do try to do like YouTube videos for my YouTube channel. Every trip I go, I try to take videos of the family or the sightseeing or the drive-in and things like that. So I do. And on my blog on Goodreads, I do try to let people know what's coming as well.
Okay,
there too.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, we really appreciate you coming on tonight. Again, I appreciate you rescheduling. That was kind of unexpected, but it's been a really good chat with you. And just for everybody that's tuned in tonight, make sure you check Ryan out. If you don't already know him, go ahead and follow him on social media and check out his website. And then again, this is the last show of the season, so we appreciate everybody tuning in this week. These shows are recorded after being live, so you can watch them at any point on Go Indie Now. And thank you, Ryan. I really appreciate you coming on the show tonight.
Hey, no problem. Thanks for having me, and I'm glad we could reschedule and get it done. So thank you for having me. It was my pleasure.
For sure. And thank you, everybody. Just remember, it's always time for Go Indie Now.